Imagine your players roll up to the gates of the city, and the first thing they see is a jagged wall split by an earthquake 3 centuries ago. A crooked street that bends because it once hugged a god's severed eyeball, and the tavern everybody calls the Blind Saint because the barkeep swears the eye blinked at him. Today, we're building God's Eye, one of the oldest cities in the world, and we're going to talk about how you can create a map of a city so that it feels old, that it has history baked into the very page. How can you, as a dungeon master, make your world feel as if it existed long before your players rocked up? There are several ways to answer that question, and today we are going to address them. Hello, adventurers, and welcome back to the Red Quills. Today is day 6 of our November map making challenge, and I am continuing on nice and strong with this daily challenge. I'm coming out with a new video, a new map, a new part of the world every single day, and today we're doing God's Eye. Now, for those who haven't joined us so far for this stretch of video making that we're doing here, what I'm doing for November is I'm creating 30 videos and 30 maps in 30 days to celebrate my birthday, but also it is a collaborative world building project. We're going to create an atlas of an entire world with as many different map makers and world builders and artists as we can possibly find, cram them all in so that this world feels like it is actually filled with history, rather than making it the job of one person to flesh out the entire history of a world. We're going to leave it to a team of people, and in that way I think achieve something that none of us could do on our own and create this sort of open world resource that any of us can use for free. So if you like that idea, hit the subscribe button, like this video, comment below to help the algorithm and show more people what we're doing here, and stick around as we talk about this city map of God's Eye. Most of us have slapped a city together in an afternoon. You stick a square on a page, you plop down a keep, you dot some shops, you name the streets like Elf Street, and you call it law. And it works, but it feels like a movie set. It's gorgeous from the front, it's plywood in the back. And we're going to do the opposite here. We're going to stack on some very messy, very real history so that when the rogue asks, why is that tower leaning, you don't shrug, you can tell them about the earthquake that liquefied the ground and how the guild rebuilding it was so broke that they hired goblins to mix the mortar. And by the end, you'll have a dead easy 4-layer trick to turn any blank map into an archaeological dig. Ready? Let's start digging. Now, the problem that I have when you're creating, honestly, anything in D&D is the time problem. All right. Now, I know that everyone in the fantastical genre, particularly in the Western world, is built somewhere in view of Mount Tolkien. We can all see it. It casts a vast shadow over every single thing that we do, and especially D&D is kind of based on it. And that's great. That's great. I love that. I love Tolkien. I'm a huge fan, but there is a problem. And the problem exists in the timeline. All right, because in Tolkien and the Legendarium there, the elves live literally forever, right? And they don't in D&D. But that means that the elves in Tolkien's world, they don't really innovate. They're not supposed to do that because they can remember the dawn of time. They don't bother to really develop new things. They can develop them as far as they want to. And once they're happy with the aesthetics and the functionality of something, they don't see the point of going any further with it. It means that they are stuck historically, sociologically, culturally, in one point in time forever. It's the humans that innovate, and the dwarves to a lesser extent, but that doesn't translate over to most TTRPGs because the elves there, or the dwarves there, or the humans there, they all have their own relative lifespan. Nothing exists forever, but you do routinely have the lifespan of an elf being 700 or 800 years, which is a problem. Because if someone lives for that long but still dies, it means that they are still propelled forward by the instinct to improve upon their life from the beginning to the end of it, but that they have a much wider view of history than any individual. An elf can spend centuries honing their ability to invent and get better and better and better over time, and still have the threat of mortality looming over them and informing them that they need to make it yet more better. More better? You know what I mean. And so the problem then is that where does it end? It would increase exponentially the ability to invent and innovate over a lifetime because of the gathering of knowledge and resources, and it means that a dependence upon libraries and research and cross-collaboration is vastly reduced. So how do you stop a fantasy world where people routinely live for 700 years from reaching a technological advancement some 7 times faster than our own? Easy. It's the same way that we can show the history in a city, by disaster. Disaster is the carbon dating that we're going to apply to this city. It's the reason that it hasn't advanced further, but the reason that it still stands. Life is not the constant building of the Tower of Babel, it's what happens after the tower falls. And so we're going to incorporate that into this city and into every city that we build. But in this particular case, when you're going to build a city that's some thousands of years old, and you ask yourself, that's only 10 generations of elf, or whatever you want to make it, how do you show that they haven't continued to evolve and adapt and change over that lifetime? How can you show that they have actually changed and had different social patterns, and each elf or dwarf or human or however long they live has lived in a distinct time period from everyone else? How do you show that history actually is breakable into chunks of understanding and mythology and storytelling and power that is distinct from everyone else? Because, I know that history is, a moving line, that time is an illusion. I'm aware of that. But on the other hand, we want to make it feel like history is full of something, that it isn't one lifetime that stretches out to the beginning of the world, that it is, in fact, the experience of multitudes upon multitudes. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a seed, the seed of history. When we plant the seed of our city, where does it begin? Every city is the answer to a question, which is why here and not 10 miles east? And in God's eye, the answer is, it's pretty metal, honestly. 10,000 years ago, the god Anak died mid-battle with his brother, and his left eye, an iris the size of a city block, fell like a meteor, carved a perfect crater into the coast, and cracked open like a cosmic geode. And because he's a god, of course, that eye it's not, visceral, like it would be if it were a mortal person. It is the essence of what an eye is supposed to be for a creature that contains, the power of a universe. So it is more of a magical artifact than an actual piece of a body, and we want to keep that in mind. Liquid starlight still pools in the depression. It glows soft silver. And the mortals who found it, early in the days of the Stone Age, camped on the rim because the light healed wounds and stretched lifespans. And that single night gave us the city and the name. The first layer is the circle, of course. It's the crater itself. Where the eye landed, it created a small indentation directly around itself, and then a much larger one from the force of the impact. And that's the central city. And what we want to do when we create it is ask ourselves what the original city looked like, because cities grow and expand over time. And in the Stone Age, when they originally found it, they would have created a small settlement around it, which was then, destroyed over time. Another one grew up and was destroyed again. How do they rebuff against that? Easy. They use the crater as a wall and build yet another wall on top of it. So that's what we're going to do. Build the ruins of an ancient wall around the outside of the circle, and then have the interior be what the village used to be. Larger buildings or blocks or temples are ancient in origin and no longer perform any significant function because the buildings can't be trusted anymore. They'll collapse over time. Some of the newer taverns will use the facade of older buildings. Some streets actually wander between the buildings, so old now that they actually lean against one another. The age of it is felt in the disasters and the decay of time. It kills mortal and material alike, and we want to show that. So that is our original layer. The first layer is the defensive one. Those people who are huddling around it trying to stop their neighbors from taking it. That oldest area is a fortress, is everything that they required of it to be. It wasn't for farming, but it was for people who huddled around it. And once that was too full, once people began to spill outside, once the area around it became much more safe to live in, then the city expanded and they began to grow further outside. What do they do then, once they've moved past the initial layer and moved into the second layer? Well, that's easy. They create several smaller settlements around the outside, smaller villages that are sort of appendices or add-ons to the major ones. And those supply the food, the drink, the livestock, the goods for the major city. The city itself is now well established. It's old. It has defenses. It is fortifiable. And so the villages around it are filled with the peasants that support the nobles who are within. And over time, again, those defenses are constantly rebuffed and destroyed and rebuilt and repaired. And the villages themselves, over time, grow and grow and grow until they themselves need villages further and further out, which brings us to the third layer. Because now it's not a town being surrounded by supportive villages, it is a city, which in and of itself requires not a few villages, but an entire nation to support it. And they build yet another wall, being aware of the fact that time does not heal all wounds, and that they are constantly in need of defending themselves from people who invade from other kingdoms. So they are a city-state in their own right, and they need new buildings to show that. So they create new landmarks in the shade of where the old villages used to be, buying up the village greens and the farms and the fields. And they build the baths and the inns and the libraries and the vaults that provide some of the services that only a city requires. But building a wall around a city is much more difficult than it is to build a wall around a fortress. And so over time, the budget runs out. The wall does not extend the entirety of the way around the city, which is some 40 or 50 miles in circumference. Now we're dealing with a city that has a massive gap in the wall, but that is fine too. Because a city to be invaded by its enemies is an hostile place. Moving cavalry into streets is suicide for the invaders, and urban guerrilla warfare is entirely different to maneuvering on an open plain. Which brings us, of course, to the fact that eventually they realize that being invaded is not the thing that they are afraid of most. Natural disasters have now beset the city several times, and plague and economic disasters are the ones they now most fear. Because yes, time does nothing but separate the good from the bad, and the scum always rises to the top. So the rich and powerful become lords and ladies and hoard more and more of their wealth. And the villages that once supported the city are now not filled with farmers and workers, but are filled with peasants and beggars. And that divide grows wider and wider. But the rich have the money and the resources to build the things that they want, which adds the fourth layer to the city, which is that of the courtiers and the lords and the ladies, and as the court itself. So now we have 4 layers. We have the original layer, the reason the city was there, built around the eye itself in the shadow of the crater. Then the next one is the villages that supported that initial fortress when it grew to be large enough. The layer after that is what happens when those villages eventually overflowed with people and became the capital of a kingdom. And the 4th layer is what happened when they were mindful enough to separate the poor from the rich and the economic from the material. And in that way, they create different layers, and remembering that the way to carbon date a city is its disasters gives us the opportunity to add ruins within the city, to add vast swathes of the wall that were never rebuilt, towers that stand alone from a wall that long since collapsed, alleyways that run between buildings that are now leaning against one another after centuries of drooping in either direction, alleyways across canals that are dry, signs of cracks in the earth from earthquakes 400 years ago. Those kinds of events scarred the city for lifetimes afterwards and continue to do so now. And that is how you can show the history of the city. And of course, by naming literally everything. As many names as you possibly can, squeeze them onto the page, and the more detail you have, the more it will feel like you have a full history there, which is time consuming, yes, but overall is worth it. And so finally we come to this map of the God's Eye. I used simple fineliner pens and a little bit of watercolor paint to showcase the entire thing. Overall, if I had a little bit more time, I would have added a few more names, but today I'm on a little bit of a time crunch because unfortunately I do have to go to work later today and I need to get this video done. So what I am going to do is I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to ask you to let me know what you think of the map in the comments. It will of course be available for download on the Patreon. You can find it there. I'm just going to bundle all the maps together. I won't release them daily. They'll just come out in bundles. So if it's not out today, it'll be out in the next few days. So keep an eye out there. And once again, thank you for watching. It's wonderful to have you guys support me, and let me know what you think of the series in the comments. And I know what you're waiting for. It is the prompt for tomorrow's video. What we're going to do tomorrow is we are going to create the base for an archmage. And what I was thinking of is of giving it a little bit more interest. We often face wizards and liches and sorcerers on their own, but an archmage often is the court wizard or the advisor to a throne. So what about an archmage that commands an army? What does the base for a rebellion look like led by an archmage? We're going to create the Hollow Crown, the ruin of a city now inhabited by the forces of the rebellion led by an archmage. And I will see what you create, and I will create my own in tomorrow's video of the Hollow Crown. I will see you then. We got, oh, good gracious, where's my hand going? All right, that's a bit better. How are we looking? We can see that. Cool.